Hello, everybody. Welcome again to a brand new episode of the Ultimate Cloud Learning Show by your favorite cloud learning platform, K21 Academy. In this particular episode, we have the Director of Product Management at Cisco and the author of Oracle Cloud Infrastructure for Solutions Architect book, Prasenjit Sarkar, sir. Welcome, sir. Thank you very much for accepting the invitation.
Thanks, Shivans. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to have it here and talk about the cloud journey. And you may have other questions that I can try to answer.
Definitely, sir. This is the very first time we have a Kubernetes expert in the house as well. So I'm pretty sure a lot of our viewers who are interested in that particular domain, they are going to be enthusiastic, not only having you here, but also to get their doubts and so on, answered as well. So I'll start from the very basics and from the very introductory phase. That is your own career journey. You had quite an elaborative career journey. You have worked in a variety of different roles as well. So could you tell us a little about that?
Sure. So, it's been 17 years I'm in this IT industry. Started with very basic, kind of an IT to IT, desktop to desktop kind of a support model. And from there, the career has evolved in various different directions. Obviously, at that point in time, in 2003, things were quite chaotic, I would say. I started as a network engineer back in those days, and started working with the Cisco equipments. You talk about Cisco 2621 XM router, 1900 series switches, and PIX 515E firewalls. And from there, what I have seen is that by 2005, the evolvement of or evolution of virtual machines or x86 virtualization technology started booming, and I moved on to that bandwagon pretty swiftly. uh, and then one of the things that struck into my eyes by 2006 is VMware Workstation, and it was a pretty cool technology to have x86 virtualization running on top of my laptop or running my on my desktop. That was pretty cool, and I was literally blown away by their technology. So 2006, that was the time when I started working with VMware technology. 2007, they released VMware GSX or ESX 2.x. And from there until 2015, 2016, I was totally married to VMware technology. Worked with various different technology companies. So you talk about General Electric. I was part of HP. That part of time it was HP, before it became HP Enterprises. And then I moved on to work with consulting companies like Capgemini, and then finally joined VMware as senior member of consulting, senior member of um, engineering team. I was part of the engineering team who was responsible for creating and making sure that the vCloud Air is really going to be one of the cloud to be the challenger of AWS. Well, from that perspective, been there for about 4 years. And then when the cloud started getting boom in 2015, it was a time for me to just move on, and start working on something which can challenge me in every day. So in 2016, I joined Oracle Cloud Infrastructure team to make sure that we can have a solid enterprise class ready cloud. And Oracle was in a making of generation 2 cloud platform. So we were the really the first batch to have seen the evolution of Gen 2 cloud at OCI, and how 150 team member became all of a sudden 7,000 people at one point in time. So that was a kind of a run time. If you see it from 115 people to 7,000, it's a huge thing, right? So been there about 5 years into various different product management roles, whereas initially I was a outbound product manager, taking care of the field request, and looking at the traditional product management area, how we can make sure that the Oracle Cloud is going to be successful in across the different industry, different tech sectors. And yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed at least three different roles that I was there for about 5 years. And then last year I took a jump from Oracle to Cisco, and the reason was, the innovation aspect uh, that has been introduced with Cisco's emerging technologies and incubation venture. So right now here I'm part of the ETNI, or Emerging Technologies and Incubation group. Here we are every day getting challenged to create something out of the box, to create something as a very innovative solutions. And our main focus is Kubernetes. Main focus is one of the main focus is modern apps. And when I say modern apps, Kubernetes is basically really a part of that. And Cisco, being known as the networking giant, one of my main focus is to see how that networking can be really integrated within the Kubernetes environment, how we can make sure that the customer, getting a really a connected environment. You talk about either a traditional on-premises environment, or a completely cloud environment, or in a hybrid cloud environment, right? How those microservices are getting the connectivity from on-premises to the cloud and in a hybrid environment. So we are coming out with a lot of different products. 3 4 days, 3 days back, we just launched our one of the flagship product called Cisco Service Mesh Manager, which is a, a kind of a de facto standard for how do you manage your Istio service mesh across your environment, right? So
Yeah.
that's one of the product that I have laid from the front, and now it is out of the door. And people can really go ahead and try that product for free. So we have literally given that as a free of cost, so somebody can just go ahead and give it a try at eti.cisco.com and then go from there. So yeah, this is how the whole journey has been evolved from being what I was doing in back in 2003 and now 2022. How this has been spanned across various different technologies. You talk about from networking, then virtualization, then and now into the microservices, core microservices, into the area of core product management. So this is where I am now.
Definitely. I mean, I have to kind of an emphasize on one particular point, that's from being wowed about the products that Cisco is coming up to becoming the director of product management at Cisco. That's been quite a journey for you as well, right?
Yep, absolutely, absolutely, yes.
So you also mentioned that you had a particular stint at the Oracle as well, especially in the cloud infrastructure. You also author of one of the popular books on the same as well. So what could you tell us a little about the book itself and how it came into existence and all of that?
Fair enough. So, I by 2019 I joined the Cloud Native Product Management BU, and I started working with all of those cloud native technologies. So, for an example, you talk about Oracle Kubernetes Engine OKE or Oracle Functions, then API Gateway, then Cloud Shell, SDKs, and all of that. And by that time, I was also leading, and it was in charge for creating the developer certifications from OCI perspective. So I was in charge of developer adoption as a product manager as well. Now during that time, one of the things that I have realized is that how big this whole cloud market is, number one. Number two is how small Oracle has a footprint, and how people are really really hungry when they try to understand and learn new technologies coming out of Oracle, right? So then I started seeing that people are really trying to understand the background of this generation 2 cloud platform at Oracle. And being the one of the you know one of the first member of this whole engineering slash PM org, I knew that I had to tell the story of how that evolvement has happened over the years, right? So that was the main, I would say, motivation for me to get started on that. I have written 6 books so far before Oracle Cloud Infrastructure book. So I had a very good experience of writing book and how that process should look like. So my the go-to publisher for always has been it is Pack Publisher. So I contacted them. I said, hey, you know what? And this is, I mean, I'm a familiar name to them, and they are familiar to me as well. So it was a no-brainer that when there's no competition out there, we had to get this book out as soon as possible. Obviously, pandemic has created a lot of challenge for personally for me, health concerns, anxiety from these lockdowns, managing, home safety, and a toddler at home. So it has created a little bit of challenge in the very beginning of this writing of the book. So that's why it took a year time for me to write down about 12 chapters, 11 chapters. Yeah. But yeah, other than that, it was pretty smooth. So I contacted Pact, and then I submitted the synopsis of what we wanted to write, and then they have approved that, and then I started writing that book whole from there. And yeah, I mean, so for this book, if you ask me that, it is basically carved out into two different sections. Uh, one section is going to talk about how this whole Oracle Cloud Infrastructure's base services or core services have been evolved. What are the different services? What are the different choices are there? How it was made? What was the motivation of creating this whole cloud platform? And things like that. So, for an example, evolution of Oracle Cloud Generation 2 platform, and then what are the different compute choices, IAM principles, networking, which is again, it's really the IP for OCI. So they created a really a niche way of how the cloud networking should look like, and it's phenomenal. That architecture design is phenomenal. It is under IP protected law. And then again, the traditional other core services like compute, the storage, and the databases, which is again one of the prime thing for OCI. So this book is basically divided into those core services in the very beginning, and then it is going to take up to another direction, which is the cloud native section. So the last 5 chapters or 6 chapters is basically divided into different areas of, let's say, we talk about Oracle Cloud, Kubernetes engine, the functions, API gateway, Cloud Shell, and also at the end of it, the SDKs. And I have seen a lot of problems when we talk about how a cloud developer, how a community cloud developer is going to consume Oracle Cloud, right? And how do they get started? So as part of a product manager job for a developer adoption, it was one of my core tasks is to understand why people are not adopting, let's say, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, and from a development perspective, right, from the dev machines and their execution environment and things like that. So when we understood the whole data, we saw that it is kind of a thing that when you come to a cloud platform, you need to understand the very basic development part, where, for example, I want to have a machine up and running from where I can execute some REST API calls, and how the documentation should look like, how easy it is for me to just consume it, being really the first timer, right? So we took care of that, rather this book took care of that, and it showed that how easy and how how intuitive it is for a developer or for a community based developer to consume OCI, and take up the examples, write some scripts in a Python, write some scripts even in shell, just a very plain vanilla shell, and then go from there. And at the end of the book, the last chapter is basically again tying in the whole hybrid cloud story, mapping, which is how this Oracle Cloud VMware solution today is actually taking place, right? How you can bring in your own VMware environment into the cloud mix, and still being able to run the bare metal x86 virtualization on top of cloud, and then have your virtual machines running on top of that. Then how do you extend that? How do you extend that using HCX plugin to the cloud from your on-premises environment, and all of that. So yes, all in all, it was a very fruitful journey. Been about a year journey, going back and forth in with the editors to having this formatted in a way that it should look like. Then having been getting it reviewed by the technical experts, and then at the end of the day, one of my friend and colleague, Guillermo, has written the foreword, who is right now the director of evangelism, developer evangelism at Oracle, or OCI. So yes, I started a journey, and yeah, after a year we got this book out. So very happy that finally the book is out, And yeah, people can really get the benefit out of that if they really want to make sure that they want to understand the basics of it, the evolution of generation 2 cloud platform, and also try to understand the developer persona by the end of this book.
Definitely, definitely. Guys, make sure you check Sanjit's book out. You can find it on Package Direct website as well. We ourselves at the show have had two authors who have had books from Packet itself. We have got Saurav from AWS, as well as I believe the last episode was with Gareth Igar. He also is an author on Packet itself. So yeah, we're becoming kind of an in-house platform for Packet itself to kind of talk about the books itself. Okay, so the next question is about your expertise as well. So you have worked extensively on Kubernetes as well, and is considered quite a respectable person in the entire Kubernetes community as well because of the things that you regularly share on the platform as well. So I believe you're the best person to talk about this and to ask this question when we talk about it. The transformation and evolution, according to you, how has it been for Kubernetes throughout the years now?
So, okay, so that's a good question, Shivan. So, let's talk about how this whole thing, how this Kubernetes thing has evolved over the years. So, the initial configuration of this, Kubernetes, or the container orchestration system allowed the organization to work on a physical server alone, right? Um, the so let's take a step back and let's talk about how does the evolvement of physical servers, then the virtual machines, and then containers, and then Kubernetes. That's the way a person is going to look to the Kubernetes world, and that's the way the organization is also looking at, right? So the issue of this physical servers alone, the arrangement was that the fact that the servers had no boundary separation facilities, right? So when the server resources were literally allocated to different applications, one application could take up the most of the servers, and that led up to the allocation disparities, right? So that paved the way for more advanced virtual machine. But let's look at that. How did this help? Well, essentially, the system ensured that the multiple virtual machines can run on the same physical server CPU. That's good. The biggest advantage here is that those virtual machines had well-defined boundaries that provided the sense of kind of a security. But the main issue here is that each of these virtual machines had its own operating system and then own set of hardware, making them really, really a heavy platform, right? And to resolve that problem, the more recent addition to this platform was containers. So these containers had literally the slightly relaxed boundaries that facilitated the applications to share the same operating system. Um, so while these containers are a very effective way of running your applications, there are one major challenge associated with them, right? They need a solution to run it into the production environment. The idea of a continuously monitored and managed this containers environment to ensure your continuity of services is really relevant right now. So some of these checks is involved in the management of including providing the system is exemplary and is not experiencing the same downtime, right? This process of running and scaling these containers in production environment becomes really, really a tricky option. Now, if you look at that, Kubernetes was introduced as a solution to this complex problem, which is the container orchestration. So it helps manage your distributed container system effectively. It helps you to run and scale your containers while taking care of your downtime really, really quickly, right? So the infrastructure of Google Borg, which is the predecessor, and I'll tell you why is that. So the infrastructure of Google Borg has heavily influenced this Kubernetes design and development procedures. Most of those developers and contributors of Kubernetes have previously worked with the Google Borg. Now, the Google Borg basically became the predecessor of Kubernetes. Obviously, Google Borg is not exactly the same Kubernetes, but it has given a lot of input towards the Kubernetes development. Now, it is important to understand that, Kubernetes obviously is an open source version of Borg. Now, Borg basically became Omega, and then Omega became the open source version of Kubernetes. Now, you can think about this Kubernetes, right? Kubernetes. So that basically came from this very well known Greek word called Helmsman. And if you look at the Kubernetes logo, you'll understand that this is the kind of a thing that shows a person who steers a seafaring ship. So this theme is reflected in their logo, as I said. Apparently, some of the people also involved in the creation of this Kubernetes wanted to call it as 7 of 9. If you look at that logo, you'll see that there are 7 different spokes, right? And this is basically being taken out from a female Borg rescued by the crew of the USS Voyager under the command of Captain Catherine Janeway. So that was a kind of a history of that. So when Kubernetes become really, really popular, Google released this portal back in 2014 as an open source platform, and then from there it started the evolution. So companies in the worldwide are now putting a lot of effort to run their application on this Kubernetes platform. One of the primary reasons that we have seen for that is the you can reduce the time it takes to deploy an application for the market. So the go-to market is really, really faster when you talk about microservices, and then it is getting orchestrated through Kubernetes. These can be really, really attributed to most efficient application development efficiencies that we have seen. So in effect, it also paves the way for your IT cost optimization as well. So one important factor contributing to the success of Kubernetes and its high adoption today is its flexibility with different cloud providers. So this has a twofold advantage. So let's say that for starters, Kubernetes and its containers allow you to work on multi-cloud platform, right? So as a result, you now have the opportunity to run your application with combination of the cloud platform. So you talk about, let's say you want to run it on top of Google Cloud Platform, then Google Cloud plus the Google Cloud Kubernetes engine. You talk about AWS, then EKS or Elastic Kubernetes Services. Then you talk about Azure, and then Azure Kubernetes Services or AKS, right? So absolutely, this concept of vendor lock-in is done away with this kind of a scenario, right? As a result, your business is now not really restricted to a single cloud platform, and they can just move along, right? So that's how the evolution of Kubernetes has happened. When 2014, we have seen Google coming out and then giving that Kubernetes as an open source, and then from there how that evolution have started, and how companies like Microsoft, IBM, Docker, Google itself, and other companies have onboarded onto this platform, and then started evolution of this whole Kubernetes area. So that's how it has been gone ahead in terms of the journey.
Okay, so like right now as well, in addition to what you just said, a lot of Fortune 500 companies are also adopting Kubernetes. So is it something just for the for the bigger enterprises, or Kubernetes is something that small startups or businesses could also work around?
Absolutely. Well, everybody in if you talk either you talk about Fortune 500 or startups, everybody are now getting onboarded with Kubernetes. Now, let me tell you why. So, this business's benefits of going through this digital transformation, or when you call it as all those big Fortune 500 companies, they have lots of monolithic applications, and they really wanted to. The main one of the major problem of CIOs is that how quickly I can get my applications to the market, how quickly I can serve my target market, how quickly I can get my development teams the need that they ask for to get started onto the application development, and then port that application or create this application in a cloud native way, and then provide that agility to the IT enterprises as well, right? So the IT capabilities needed this capacity, or I would say this Kubernetes environment to deliver these benefits, right? So what is very clear is that this containers is becoming a must-have platform for all of these IT architectures. Containers offer all these benefits of immutable infrastructure, this predictability, repeatability, faster development and deployment onto the platform, right? So with these capabilities, containers change the way of application are being architected today, and this is getting designed, developed, packaged, delivered, and managed, right? So but a very strength of containers can become it's literally the Achilles heel. It's very easy to create lots and lots of containers. So let's say thousands and 10,000s of containers. And now we have a very new problem. Like, how do you manage those, right? How do you control the ephemeral containers that have lifetime of a few seconds to minutes, let's say? How do you optimize the resource utilization in a large scale containerized environment? The answer is orchestration, and orchestration of containers through Kubernetes. So there are five fundamental business problems or business idea, I would say, business topics that the CIOs are trying to solve through the digital transformation and using Kubernetes. Number one is faster time to market, right? How fast am I going to serve my market? Because market is very hungry. We cannot sit down and think about how am I going to chuckle a kind of let's say a one page of code or a couple of 100,000 lines of code, and then make it really small and compatible, and then also compatible to the cloud native environment, right? So how fast I can develop my application, how fast I can package it, how fast I can deploy it, how fast I can manage it. Number one problem for CIO, faster time to market. The second problem for CIOs is IT cost optimization. So this is again that how long do I have to maintain those heavy lifted servers onto my data centers? So what is my goal for next 5 years? Do I have to maintain, let's say, X number of data centers for my company? Can I cut it down? And when I cut it down, what does it mean? Can I port those applications which is running into there to the cloud environment? How easy it is, and then go from there, right? And that's basically the cost optimization factor. The third point is improved scalability and availability. So scalability is, of course, when you try to scale it up to 10,000 let's say nodes, and thousands and thousands of containers on top of that. It's really, we are talking about the scalability. And availability is again going through multiple number of nodes, the pod scheduler that you have, and giving it all together, creating this highly available environment, right? The fourth point that we have is the multi-cloud flexibility and the hybrid cloud flexibility. So today we do have solutions like Istio Service Mesh and Network Service Mesh to connect these islands. So you can run an application into multi-cloud environment, either for a DR scenario, either for a high available scenario, or even for a highly distributed scenario. So all of these scenarios can be catered through, let's say, service meshes in different kind of service meshes, layer 7 service meshes, layer 3 service meshes as well. So that's about how am I going to run this multi-cloud and hybrid cloud flexible environment, and on that environment, how am I going to run my applications? The fifth point that the CIOs are really looking at is effective migration to the cloud. So how it is easy for me to migrate an application which is running a monolithic way in my data center to the cloud, right? So obviously you're looking at, again, I would emphasize highly to look at how the Istio Service Mesh has come up to a maturity level, and how that can help you to get to point A to point B. Point A is when you are running all of these applications in a monolithic way in your on-premises data center. From there, how you're going to migrate those applications to the cloud. And obviously there are huge tasks that you have to go through to just not about the migration, but how do you even cut down those applications from monolithic to being really the microservices, the tiny small microservices in a very distributed way. So these are the five business problems that CIO have seen, and these are the way that these are the causes that is affecting business, and the Kubernetes adoption. So Kubernetes adoption has skyrocketed because it can solve and it can serve all of these five different purposes.
So, in addition to that as well, a lot of companies are kind of reluctant on shifting to Kubernetes because of the security reasons as well. Could you expand a little on that? Like, what's your opinion on that?
Absolutely. Well, security concerns are there since a long time. For heavy, let's say that security concerns started from the very beginning of those mainframes, then the server hardware, then the containers itself, and then of course the Kubernetes, right? So it is very risky for businesses to unveil an application without first making sure that it passes their security assessment. So to increase this agility, which is one of the main benefits of containers and Kubernetes, companies must have a renewed focus on security, right? So if you look at this, enhanced feature velocity and very quick application development are both the key benefits of containerization. But when cybersecurity is not emphasized, they can get both really come at a cost of sacrificing your agility. And this is why you must incorporate security in the development as well as building phase of adequately address all these potential challenges and avoid a potential security headache. So let me talk about a quick survey. I mean, let me talk about the survey very quickly. So, State of Container Kubernetes Security has done a survey in fall 2020. And according to that survey, 90% of the respondents had said that they had security breaches within their Kubernetes environment. Think about that, 90%. Furthermore, there are nearly half of respondents, which is 44%, have said that the security issues have prevented their apps from being deployed in a timely manner. So these statistics underscore the renewed importance of security in DevOps and how those vulnerabilities can negatively affect the agility. So what are we looking at? So there are different areas that we need to look at. There are four different main areas that security, I mean, the renewed security focus has to be there. And this is something which is actually causing the problem. Number one is misconfiguration and exposures, right? So think about how do you need to pay really, really attention to the container images, Kubernetes secrets, namespaces, runtime privileges, network policies, persistent storage, and control plane. So these are the main factor where the misconfiguration happens and the main exposure happen from these aspects. That's the number one problem. Number two problem is vulnerabilities. So we need to identify the vulnerabilities in images, including when you install the operating system packages and runtime libraries into your programming languages as well. Now, we need to prevent the images with really risky vulnerabilities from getting pushed to the production accessible container registry. We need to have a method to leverage the custom third party admission controller in Kubernetes clusters to prevent the scheduling of these vulnerable container images. So that's about the vulnerabilities. The third problem that we have seen as a security is the runtime threat. We need to monitor runtime activities. We need to leverage the declarative data that we have on top of Kubernetes environment. We need to limit the unnecessary network communications, and that is where service meshes layer 3 and layer 7 comes into play. And you need to use process allow list as well. That is the runtime threat behavior, right? That is where the main threats that is the main exposure happen. The fourth problem is the failed compliance audit. So there are different compliance standards specific to containers and specific to Kubernetes that apply to every organizations. And those, if you look at very closely, there are CIS benchmark for Docker. There's a CIS benchmark for Kubernetes, and then you have NIST SP 800-190. Okay. So these are the four different brackets where people are or organizations are getting puzzled. And I would say there are a lot of tools to look at that, but yeah, customers really, really, really need to look at these four aspects to make sure that they are not getting into a cyber attack, and they're not going to report that, hey, you know what, 90% again last year, we got we have been attacked into our containers and to your Kubernetes environment. So these are the things that comes into my mind.
Thank you very much. I believe that really clarifies the reasons why this particular thing is happening and to which extent as well. So, guys, again, I forgot to mention this in the just of moment because I personally have a lot of questions today for sir as well. If you guys have any questions, please do put them down in the comment section, and please try to put them down right now or as we go. Usually, what happens is you put the questions down at the very end when we are closing the live, and that particular time it's difficult for me to pick all of them. So please try to put them down as we go, and I'll take up as one by one during the session itself. Okay, so we talked about the transformation, the past, we talked about the present and the issues that we are facing currently. What do you think the future holds for Kubernetes as a whole? Because it is very well on the path where it's transforming the entire cloud industry as a whole. But there are, just like you mentioned, there are a few issues associated with that as well. So how do you think is it going to, kind of get over those issues in the coming future? Do you think that's going to happen, or something new is going to come up and kind of replace Kubernetes on that part?
Well, it's really hard to say that something is not in making, and it is very hard to say that something is not going to take it over, right? In 2007, 8, 9, at least these three, years, when VMware was making their paving their way into x86 virtualization and solidifying those the functionalities of x86 virtualization, having those very amazing features of DRS, storage DRS, vMotion, and all of that, and vCenter, managing all of that. It was very hard to say that virtualization at one point in time, or commercialized vendor locked in virtualization, is not going to go away. It was very hard to say that. Nobody has seen that Docker or containers are coming. Nobody has seen that the Kubernetes is coming. Fast forward 4 5 years, 2014, Google released Kubernetes and took the entire industry by storm, right? 8 years into the market, and still it is very, very, very strong. But does it mean that it is going to stay forever? It is very hard to predict. It is very hard to say that it is going to be the de facto standard for the application deployment, going forward, because there are a lot of different areas which is upcoming these days, and a lot of other challenges that probably Kubernetes cannot solve. Okay, so obviously one of the other way to look at is how that cloud out and edge in scenario is playing out today. How Kubernetes is going to evolve is ecosystem plus its runtime to cater to that environment, right? To that edge computing environment, to the small Raspberry Pi environment. How am I going to run that? How am I going to secure those environments, right? So there are thousands of retailers who are running a Kubernetes environment today, and they have been expressing their concerns about how heavy for them is to have those infrastructure running in all the different retail stores, right? These are the use cases. These are the live or real use cases that I'm talking about. So it is very hard to say that, but let's look at least in next 4 5 years, without taking into account that somebody is in the making or something can just take up this whole Kubernetes thing by storm. So if you look at Gartner predicts that by this year, more than 75% of global organizations will be running containerized application into the production, which is a significant increase of 30% in 2019 when they say that, right? So when industry influencers and CIO talk about the future of computing, they typically are not the only discussing about the hardware enhancement and advancement, or cloud-based software. Increasingly, these conversations are getting centered on transformation through the application innovation, providing the new predictive services to customers that are driven by integrated user experience. So this could be something like inspecting the customer data pattern to promote new banking services, right? Analyzing the health indicators to proactively recommend the treatment, or an immersive interface for personalized interactions, right? So whatever the end product is going to be, it's about gaining a competitive advantage is really, really evolving, and that is the main factor of the faster go to market. So in this highly competitive market environment, we need to go through this technological advancement as well. So now enter containers, right? So containers enable these applications to evolve faster, increase the developer velocity to bring a greater level of portability, then consistency, regardless of your underlying infrastructure. So we really don't care whether I have a vMotion, I have a storage vMotion, and I have a DRS or storage DRS. We really don't care. I mean, fast forward to 2022, we really don't care about those, to be honest. Now, this makes Kubernetes the de facto standard right now for running these containerized applications in a cloud native way at a scale a critical part, which is a critical part now for a modern enterprise IT mix. Now, CIOs and IT decision makers recognize the importance of Kubernetes. That is going to enable the developer productivity and high-speed business innovations, right? So the future of IT, I would say that it's going to be about greater interactivity, seamless, integrated experiences, predictive analysis, automation, decision making via, let's say, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and making sense of data exhaust, adding in augmented and virtual reality. You think about metaverse, which is upcoming, and a host of other applications we just cannot imagine yet. Okay, so these applications will run most effectively when they are offered in greatest flexibility and agility. Container based applications today and cloud native apps orchestrated by Kubernetes offers these attributes, which is becoming the de facto standard. Now, that's what it is today. But can it say that it is going to stay for next 10 years? Hard to say that. Very hard to say that. If there is a greater way, if there is a better way to provide this predictive analysis, this interactive user experience, and automation, decision making, predictive analysis, and other stuff, obviously I think IT industry will just move on. If there are problems that still persist in Kubernetes environment, then definitely another evolution we are going to see, and we are going to see some more evolution when the metaverse is going to be really, really in effect. So yes, is as we can say that yes, it is going to be the future. It is going to stay for some time, but again, it is very hard to predict that it is going to stay as the de facto standard if it falls behind the faster innovation which is happening across the board of the whole infrastructure, IT infrastructure.
Definitely, sir. I believe that, kind of that's a standard that is set for almost any other technology in the world. That if it doesn't, kind of keep up with the changes, with the requirements that the industry is kind of having, it's going to get outdated very soon.
Yeah.
So, we have talked almost all the different aspects, but there is one thing that you mentioned that kind of caught me by surprise as well, is that there's a report by Gartner as well that by the end of this year, 75% companies are going to be running on some sort of containers in itself. So that kind of comes up with a huge demand for the Docker and Kubernetes kind of professionals out there in the market. How do you think that people who are kind of coming into this industry very kind of in the introductory phases right now as a fresher, that they can make the best out of this opportunity that's kind of developing right now?
Fair enough. Well, if you look at the job market today, and if you just go to any job portal, including LinkedIn, and go to the jobs, and then you can try to search it for Kubernetes or DevOps, you'll see a tens and thousands of jobs, right? So that shows the kind of a demand of these professionals today into the market. And obviously, when everybody is looking at containerizing their applications, looking into modern apps, and going into more deeper integration of these Kubernetes environments, obviously they are looking at experts there, right? So somebody who is really, really early in this journey, I would say that uh, that that runway is has not finished yet. There are still lots of demand, where people who are just getting started right now versus the people who have already started back in 2014, 2015. um, they have they have still got a lot of runway to go ahead and make this as a career option, as like the Kubernetes expert, become that kind of a guy, right? The go-to guy for Kubernetes containerization and the whole DevOps scenario. So I would say that getting started with that should be to understand the cloud landscape first, okay? Because before cloud native, it is the cloud, and then the cloud native and Kubernetes will come into play. So somebody, I would suggest that if somebody is getting started onto that area, they need to get started with understanding of how this whole cloud is playing a part of application modernization, right? How those applications are getting migrated, number one, how those applications are getting cut cut into microservices, how this whole architecture of cloud is actually playing a role. So somebody need to go through, I would say, at least one major cloud provider. A um, well, personally, I used to be, and I'm still a little bit of fan of certifications. Certifications give you a lot of I would say space in the runway for your learning path into your career, because you need to learn a lot of different stuff. But then, not going through the malpractices of just getting clear, just clearing your certifications, right? You really need to sit down and get your heads down and understand those concepts of cloud. So first you understand the concepts of cloud, how this is really has been taken by the storm in last 10 12 years. And then you go ahead with the Kubernetes and containers to the very beginning, or at the very beginning, and then to the Kubernetes part, right? So obviously, if you look at from a learning perspective, somebody should go through, in my opinion, there are tons of trainings, tons of companies who are providing the training. There are online trainings, there are in-house trainings, and then again there are practice scenarios. You look at Katakoda, you can just go out and do the lot of practices. And there are a lot of free services as well. Oracle Cloud Infrastructure gives you two cloud VMs. You can just install whatever you want. You can get started on top of that. There is a $300 free trial for almost all the major cloud providers, so you can take a credit of that. You can get started yourself onto that zone. You can get started with their managed Kubernetes stuff. You can deploy Kubernetes the hard way, as the Kelsey Hightower says. So get started onto that path, and then understand this whole concepts of Kubernetes, because Kubernetes is a hugely over complex, I would say, overly complex distributed system, right? So first of all, understand the distributed systems fallacies, and then onto that platform, and then go onto the platform of Kubernetes, right? Understand each and every component, and then try to deploy Kubernetes the hard way rather than the easiest way. Obviously, QADM, and there are tons of thousands of tools today to get you started deploying your Kubernetes cluster. But I would always say that if you really are keen on being the expert of Kubernetes and understand this whole ecosystem, get started with Kubernetes the hard way, and then understand each and every components, how they connect, how does that work in the background, and try to read as many as articles. There are tons of blogs. There are amazing bloggers. There's a medium bloggers. So yeah, there are tons of resources available. Go through each and every one of them, and then at the end of the day, probably go for CNCF certifications. Like I myself have cleared CKA certified Kubernetes architect, certified Kubernetes application developer as well. Then there is a CKS as well for the security. Then there's a new version which is called KCNA, which is the just the entry level certifications. So there are four different certifications that you can go through, from the CNCF perspective. But I would say that before you even try and attempt the certification, because today there are easier way to consume resources just to be able to sit down onto the certification and clear the certification. But does it mean that you can talk to another Kubernetes expert in a whiteboarding? It may not be, maybe, or may not be, based on how you have prepared
Definitely,
for
sir.
that, right? So you get started literally on very basic stuff, and then go on from there. I mean, without learning characters, without learning words, you cannot write a sentence, right? So
Exactly.
you literally go through from the very basic and then take it on.
Definitely. So 100% agreed. Like I believe a lot of other people as well. I believe we had Subhashish Ghosh as well, who's a cloud solutions architect at Microsoft at the very moment. He also kind of shared a similar outlook on certifications, that it's still very relevant, but you need to have the certain skill set to back the certification that you are currently possessing as well. On that note, sir, we all are almost at the end of this session, sir. So, any last pieces of key wisdom or advice that you'd like to leave our audience with?
um, it depends. Again, it depends on which aspect people are going to look at things, right? So this whole ecosystem of Kubernetes, if you to look at, let's look at how this whole ecosystem of Kubernetes is evolving, right? So we have seen that from 2014 onwards, how how does the evolution of Kubernetes has happened, and how the cloud evolution has happened. And there are tons of thousands of tools today outside in the market. And when I look at from my job's perspective, I see that, being a part of the BU, which is purely measured on top of the innovation aspect that we are bringing into the market, we are entering into different markets area, from a company perspective, right? And there are too many innovations are happening across the board. You talk about supply chain, you talk about AI/ML, you talk about edge computing, you talk about mobile gaming, you talk about metaverse. There are way across, and again, not forgetting the 5G side as well. So you talk about private 5G, and that whole mobile open RAN and all that other market. So so there's a huge market in the IT spectrum today. So if somebody wants to get started just about the cloud, that's fine. But it is not the end of the world. Cloud is not the end of the world, right? There are other markets, there are other areas that you can concentrate on, and you can be very, very successful onto that. You can be an artist and you can make NFTs on top of that, right? You can be a
Yeah.
blockchain expert. You can be a blockchain expert. You can be an expert on, DeFi. You can be an expert on DAO, NFT, and whatnot, right? So and you can be a developer on the Web3 side as well. So there are huge area that you can explore. Just don't get into just one zone that, hey, cloud is a hot market. Obviously it is the hot market, but there are other opportunities outside the cloud as well. Cloud is not the end of the world. Cloud is just the infrastructure layer. But if you talk about the applications layer, if you talk about the experience layer, if you talk about the edge layer, then 5G, mobile experience, mobile gaming, and tons of thousands of other areas to go after. And really you can make yourself as the expert onto that area. So get ahead, understand how the market is going on, how the evolution of this whole IT thing is going on. What is the buzz? What is the buzz in the market today? So for example, I can tell you that the buzz today is into the metaverse side of it, right? I mean, we can see that, and we can conceal that idea when Facebook became Meta. They are
Yeah.
absolutely going into that aspect 100%, right? 100%. So think about how someone can become an expert on metaverse. And I can tell you, and mark my word today, and probably we can talk about it in next 1 or 2 years, when we see that there'll be certifications on metaverse itself. There'll be metaverse experts. There'll be blockchain. I mean, there are blockchain experts today also, but then the evolution of blockchain will just take it away now, right? So this evolution is going to come in next 1 or 2 years. We just need to be very careful about where we are going to play around into our career. And if you are into just one zone, I don't think that that will be there forever. I mean, those traditional routers, switches, firewalls have evolved into software. Software evolved into virtualization. Virtualization evolved into cloud. Cloud to containers. Containers to Kubernetes or container orchestration. Then we are talking about edge. We are talking about 5G, Open RAN. We are talking about AI/ML side as well. And now we are just going to get started with the metaverse, the whole concept of Web3, NFT, DAO, DeFi, and all of that. So just play a part onto that, and into our IT world. One of the thing is very relevant, which is every day you need to learn something. Every day you need to learn something and keep yourself up to date what's happening in the market. And if you really are interested about going into the market, yes, go ahead with that.
Thank you very much, sir. I believe that in itself was quite an answer. This particular session is going to be one of my favorite sessions that we've done so far. A lot of knowledge personally as well. I was not somebody who has a lot of knowledge in the Kubernetes space, but I believe this session particularly was beneficial not for somebody who's a beginner like me, but also for people who have been in Kubernetes for quite some time now. So thank you very much, sir, again for accepting the invite. Thank you everybody who's watched as well. If you guys have any questions, you can put them down in the comment section. Maybe we can pick them up afterwards as well. And this particular session, if you want to watch it again, it will be posted on our YouTube channel, so you can go and check it out over there as well. Thank you very much, sir. And it was an amazing session. Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Shivang. Thanks. Take care. Bye.
You too, sir.